All right, everybody. This is a surprise live broadcast. This was not planned, but I found this article that I really wanted to read, and I thought if I was going to read it anyway, I might as well read it with people who can comment and like and share and subscribe and view and all that. So surprise for everybody. This is a live stream. So I think a lot of us, especially people like us who are viewing this, are kind of attuned to this idea that Christianity and religions, very much as a whole, but especially Christianity, are in decline in the United States. I feel like that's being talked a lot about right now. That's a big conversation that's happening. And there's, a million different reasons that we could discuss for why we think that's happening. And it even shows up as a statistic on things like Wikipedia. But I found an article. I have not read it. I'll say that right away. We are both going into this blind. We are all, just me, going into this blind. But it looks like it's going to talk about how the prediction might be premature. So let's see here. I'm going to scroll up so we can see the full title. So the title is Predictions about the Decline of Christianity in America May Be Premature. So this strikes me as something that's maybe going to try and argue with that statistic. Again, I have not read it yet, and it is CNN, so I do feel like they do a little bit better research than, say, if I were just to pull this off some website or blog or something like that. I would even say that CNN maybe might be as good of a source as Wikipedia, maybe better. I don't know. That's totally up to you to decide. But anyway, I said all that to say, I digress. We are just going to read this together, so let's go. Predictions about the decline of Christianity in America may be premature. Analysis by John Blake, CNN, and this is from April 9th, 2023. So this is very recent. This isn't from, 2015 or something like that. The cross and the empty tomb. Both Christian symbols are bookends to the Easter story. One symbolizes the tragic execution of Jesus, while the other represents the Christian belief in his resurrection and the claim that death does not have the final word on him or his followers. As millions of Americans celebrate the holiest day in the Christian calendar on Sunday, most will hear some variation of this Easter message. Finding new life in unforeseen places, which is very true. I don't know how many of you watching have ever celebrated Easter, but that's like kind of what the whole thing is about, is rebirth. And the story of Easter, Jesus was hung on the cross and he died on the cross for our sins as a sacrifice to clean the sins of Christians or of human beings, but Christians believe it. And then he rose from the dead after 3 days. And so that's the celebration of Easter, is the celebration of the rising of his being from dead to alive, and just kind of that whole situation. But the message could also describe a surprising prediction about the future of Christianity in the US. Okay, so I think I know where this is going. For years, church leaders and commentators have warned that Christianity is dying in America. This is true. This is what I've heard as well. They say the American church is poised to follow the path of churches in Western Europe. Soaring Gothic cathedrals with empty pews, shuttered church buildings converted into skate parks and nightclubs. I think they mean parks. I don't know. And a secularized society where one theologian said Christianity as a norm is probably gone for good, or at least for the next 100 years. I would be interested to see if it randomly came back on 100 years. Yet when CNN asked some of the nation's top religion scholars and historians recently about the future of Christianity in the US, they had a different message. They said the American church is poised to find new life for one major reason: waves of Christians are migrating to the US. Now, in my opinion, this is just in my opinion, I do feel like you should be careful asking top religion scholars. Not all of them are Christians, not all of them believe the Bible, but I would say that maybe those people benefit from this idea that that religion is going to face a resurgence, right? When you ask people whose kind of career field depends on a resurgence in religions, I would think that they might be like slightly biased. Again, they didn't name anyone, they didn't list like a source here, so maybe I'm wrong in making that assertion, but just right off the bat, I'm like, well, you ask people who would benefit greatly from the idea that religion is coming back and it isn't declining permanently. So I don't know. That's like asking somebody who, studies DVDs and VHS tapes if they're going to make a comeback. Like maybe those people benefit slightly in the comeback of that technology, but let's continue. Maybe I'm wrong. And they said the biggest challenge to Christianity's future in America is not declining numbers, but the church's ability to adapt to this migration. Joseph P. Slaughter, a historian and assistant professor of religion at Wesleyan University in Connecticut, says people have been predicting the extinction of Christianity in the U.S. for over 2 centuries, and it hasn't happened yet. He pointed to Thomas Jefferson, one of the nation's founding fathers, who predicted in the 1820s that Christianity would be replaced in the U.S. by a more enlightened form of religion that rejected Jesus' divinity and belief in miracles. Interesting. Instead, Jefferson's prophecy was followed by a series of revivals, including the Second Great Awakening, which swept across America and reasserted Christianity as a dominant force in American life. I'd never bet against American Christianity, particularly evangelicalism. Oh, I said that word pretty nicely, evangelicalism. Didn't even stumble. Slaughter says, and its ability to adapt and remain a significant shaper of the American society. What's happening in Europe is the church's nightmare scenario. If one only looks at the numbers, Slaughter's optimism seems misguided. Virtually every recent poll about Christianity in America has been brutal for its followers. About 64% of Americans call themselves Christian today. That might sound like a lot, but 50 years ago, that number was 90%, according to a 2020 Pew Research Center study. The same survey said that Christian majority of the U.S. may disappear by 2070. Now, I don't think that that necessarily means that there are fewer people that are Christian. I think that actually means that there are a lot more people that are willing to say they're atheists. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, I'm not a historian. I wouldn't be surprised at all if 90% of Americans being Christian was just 90% of Americans saying they're Christian because they face social and economic ramifications, or they did at the time, for not being a Christian. I think that's something really important. I feel like with social movements, whether it's religion, gender, a lot of times political beliefs, social movements in general, I think we find become more and more visible as time goes by, but I don't think they become more and more popular. I think the people that existed under these labels that we're giving them now always existed. They just weren't allowed to talk about it. They weren't allowed to be public about it. They weren't allowed to say anything about it. So while 90% of people in 50 years ago, according to this, said during this Pew Research study that they were Christian, I wouldn't be surprised at all if a lot of them were actually atheists or non-Christians, and they just weren't necessarily allowed to say so, or they weren't allowed to say anything about it. So that's something to think about too. The COVID-19 pandemic also hurt the church in America. Church attendance was rebounded recently, but remains slightly below pre-pandemic levels. A 2021 Gallup poll revealed another grim number for Christians. Church membership in the U.S. has fallen below 50% for the first time. In addition, a cascade of headlines in recent years have stained the church's reputation, including sex abuse scandals in the Roman Catholic Church and the Southern Baptist Convention, the spread of white Christian nationalism, and the perception that the church oppresses marginalized groups such as LGBTQ people. Again, it goes back to that whole, it's not that these people are more popular now or more of them exist now. I think they've always existed. They've just been in hiding or closeted or like not allowed to talk about who they really are as people because that wasn't allowed. And you were just supposed to say that you were straight, you were white, you were Christian, whatever, you were real American. All the offensive, terrible things that we know now are just awful. Church leaders in the US also have fretted about the rise of nuns. These are people who describe themselves as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular when asked their religious identity. There's nothing to fret about. It's going to be okay. The ascent of nuns will transform the country's religious and political landscape, says Tina Ray, a professor of religious and theological studies at Salve Regina University in Rhode Island. I hope I said that right. Could be Salve. About 30% of Americans now call themselves nuns. It's going to make a nun joke, but I won't. The interests of the nuns will soon outweigh those of the religious right in just a matter of years. Ray says, nuns are going to vote as a bloc and they're going to be pretty powerful. White evangelicals will eventually be eclipsed by the unaffiliated. My, how the turntables. Interesting. It's almost like you're afraid of being treated how you treat people. But I digress. Ray says those who are optimistic about the future of the American church underestimate how quickly Christianity can lose its influence even in a place where it once thrived. She cites what's happened in the Republic of Ireland, an overwhelmingly Catholic country. The Catholic Church prohibits divorce and was once so powerful in Ireland that the country wouldn't legally grant its citizens the legal right to a divorce until 1995, says Ray, author of What the Bible Really Tells Us, The Essential Guide to Biblical Literacy. But Ray adds that she recently traveled to Ireland and discovered many of its citizens have since left the religion, or have left the religion. Churches are being closed and turned into apartment buildings, she says. That's very millennial. People who went to mass every day stopped going, she says. There's this cultural Catholic identity, but as far as practicing their faith, it's just disappearing. So within a generation, that's all it took. It's just shocking. Last season on the podcast, I actually got to talk to Thunderfoot, and we talked about this very same thing. We talked about how where he's from in Europe, your identity is more of like just for the census to put down. Are you Protestant? Are you Catholic? Whereas in the United States, it's a huge part of your identity. It's so much tied into who you are as a person. So it was interesting to hear him say that, and then to see them back up exactly what he was talking about, the jokes that he made about it. Why the American church's future may be different than Europe's. I will be interested to see what they say about this because I'm just curious. Most of the religious scholars CNN spoke to said the American church may find salvation in another demographic trend, the booming of Christianity in what's called the global south, the regions encompassing Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Okay. The world's largest megachurch, for example, is not in the US. Wow, I'm actually shocked by that. It's in South Korea. The Yoido Full Gospel Church has a weekly attendance of about 600,000 members. Can you imagine trying to find parking? Jeez Louise. Perry Hamalis spent time as a Fulbright scholar in South Korea, where he personally witnessed the vitality of the Christian church in the global south. He says the church is not perceived in South Korea as an instrument of oppression, but one of liberation. When South Korea was colonized by the Japanese in the early 20th century, the church aligned with Koreans to protest. Christianity was looked at not as a religion of empire and of the colonizers, but as the religion of the anti-colonial movement and the pro-democracy, says Hamalis, a religion professor at North Central College in Illinois. The US has more immigrants than any other country. People from Latin America and Asia now make up the overwhelming majority of immigrants to the US, and many are bringing their religious fervor with them. Interesting. I went to a Korean church for a while when I was a kid, and we were Baptist. It was a Baptist Christian church that was also a Korean church. So that tracks in my personal experience. Of course, this was Little Rock, Arkansas. This was not in Korea. So, could be different. This migration is known as the Browning of America, a phrase describing a demographic shift that is expected to make white people the minority in the US by 2045. Oh, God, no. It's fine. Those who predict that the church in America will collapse often overlook how the migration of global South Christians to America will revitalize the country's religious landscape, scholars say. Christianity could rebound in America if white Christians embrace this one change, they say. Tish Harrison Warren, a New York Times columnist, pointed out recently that Latino evangelicals are now the fastest growing group of evangelicals in the US. We cannot assume that America will become more secular so long as the future of America is less white, Warren wrote. Interesting. The influx of Black and brown Christians from places like Latin America and Asia collides with another trend, a burgeoning white Christian nationalist movement that insists incorrectly that the U.S. was founded as a white Christian nation. It is hostile to non-white immigrants. Woof. That is a really polite way to describe Christian nationalists, let me tell you. Brian Ritchie. Hey, how's it going, Brian? He says, I'm looking up some of the people quoted. Joseph P. Slaughter, the Wesleyan guy I mentioned, teaches a course called God and Guns, the History of Faith and Firearms in America. Interesting. That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Some of these people that they're speaking to, I'm like, don't you think that they benefit in some way from being able to say that Christianity isn't going anywhere and that Christianity is going to continue to flourish? I think it's interesting that we have multiple specialists or professionals they've spoken to, geez, there's the Arkansas coming out, that predict totally different things. And so I think that some of these sources, I think what you're doing by looking up these sources is really important, because it kind of like, do they benefit from claiming that Christianity is going to come back? And if it didn't work for Europe, why are we once again doing that American thing where we're like, no, we're different. We're going to be better than the rest of the world. The patterns and statistics that they follow won't impact us, right? And maybe it won't, because unfortunately, what they're saying about white Christian nationalism is true and it's growing, which is very unfortunate. Or is it similar to what I said earlier, when maybe it's not necessarily growing, people are just louder and prouder about it because they're allowed to be? Maybe they've always been this racist and white nationalist supporting, but we just kept them in their place until recent years where they're allowed to just come out and, do their thing. Some churches may discover that Jesus' command to welcome the stranger collides with their definition of patriotism, Hamalis says. Interesting. Many congregations don't realize how much of their Christian identity is wrapped up with a kind of Christian nationalist narrative, Hamalis says. There's nothing wrong with loving one's country, but for a Christian perspective, that ought to always be secondary to the mission of building the body of Christ and witnessing. Wait, I missed something in there. There's nothing wrong with loving one's country, but from a Christian perspective, that ought to always be secondary to the mission of building the body of Christ and witnessing to the gospel in the world. It's also those same people who forget Jesus was Middle Eastern. Jesus was not a white man. How Christianity could reestablish its dominance. Let's see what they predict. There are other factors hiding in plain sight that point to the continued vitality of Christianity, others say. For one, declining church membership doesn't automatically translate into declining influence. I will give them that. I know lots of people who say that they are devout Christians, but they just don't go to church because they just don't want to go anywhere on a Sunday. Consider some recent landmark events. White evangelicals played a critical role in getting former President Trump elected. Conservative Christian groups played a crucial role in the recent passage of state laws limiting LGBTQ rights, and the Supreme Court's decision last year to overturn Roe versus Wade was a massive victory for many conservative Christians. They think that, but in the long run, they will see that it is not a good thing at all, even for them. And atheism remains a taboo in American politics. American voters still prefer candidates, including President Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, who profess or evoke Christian beliefs. Christians still hold a lot of capital in this country, says Lee M. Jefferson, an associate professor of religion at Centre College in Kentucky. There has always been a popular notion that a religious community's strength or influence is connected to numbers and attendance, Jefferson says. Even if there is an ample space in cathedrals, Christianity will still hold some strong relevance in different landscapes in the U.S. Even the rise of nuns, the growing number of Americans who say they don't care about religion, is not as much of a threat to the church as initial reports suggest, scholars say. A growing number of Americans may no longer identify as Christian, but many still care about spirituality, says Hans Gustafsson, author of Everyday Wisdom, Interreligious Studies for a Pluralistic World. Just because more Americans are disaffiliating with institutionalized religion, most notably Christian traditions, this does not always mean that people are becoming less religious, says Gustafsson, director of the J. Phillips Center for Interreligious Studies at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. Many still practice spirituality, prayer, meditation, and sometimes even regularly attend religious houses of worship. Now, I don't think that spirituality should be counted as religious. I don't think that at all. Many people that I speak to on the podcast are not religious whatsoever, but they're still spiritual. I think you should be allowed to claim spirituality without having to give the point to Christianity. And I feel like that's a reach. I feel like that's them saying, see, this is proof that Christianity is going nowhere. People are still spiritual. That's like, to me, that's the equivalent of when people try to say that morality and Christianity go hand in hand, that you have to be a religious person in order to be a moral person. You don't have to be a spiritual person and be a religious person at the same time. I think you can be moral and spiritual without attributing anything to any religion. So I almost feel like that shouldn't count. I don't think spirituality should count towards what this guy is saying. We can become a very spiritual nation and also a completely atheist nation at the same time. Among Americans with no religious affiliation, some still pray daily and say religion is very important to their lives. Now, see, that's different. If they say religion is important, that's different than just being spiritual. But I don't think spiritual people should be categorized as religious people. Doesn't count. It's not the same thing. He cites a surprising finding from a 2018 Pew Research Center study of religion in Western Europe. The study found that nuns in the US are much more likely to pray and believe in God than their European counterparts, said Neha Sagal, a vice president of research at Pew. Listen, though. Listen, I know I keep pausing, but just hear me out. I still pray when there's turbulence on a plane. Just because, not because it means anything. I'm not religious at all, but I still pray when there's turbulence on a plane. That doesn't mean that like my vote should sway towards like the evangelical or the fundamentalist American, because it's not. I'm not even a spiritual person. That doesn't even count towards me, right? So I don't think just because people pray because it's like a meditative act, because it makes them feel better when the plane is bumping up and down and they're terrified of planes, doesn't mean that they should be equated as religious people. In fact, by some of these standard measures of religious commitment, American nuns are as religious as, or even more religious than Christians in several European countries, including France, Germany, and the UK. What? What? Guys, I feel like they're pulling teeth to try and flow points towards their perspective that America's coming back. That's weakness. Unless maybe I'm reading it wrong. Feel free to like comment if I'm just getting this wrong and I'm just taking it personal for no reason. That's probably very likely the case. I'm tired. Why the Easter message offers a note of hope. Despite the optimism of many religious scholars, the future of Christianity in America still seems uncertain. Poll numbers about the decline of religiousness in the US cannot be ignored, along with something more intangible, the frailties of human nature. What if the US enters another xenophobic period and limits migration from non-white Christians? What if? What if progressive Christians prove unwilling to align with non-white immigrants who tend to be more conservative on the issues of sexuality and gender? And what if some Christians still cling to the belief that America is supposed to be a white Christian nation, even if that assumption causes them to close their church doors to non-white immigrants who could be their salvation? Wouldn't that be interesting to be so racist that you're actually destroying your own like efforts? That would be wild. That would be wild. If that happens, an Easter morning symbol in American churches won't just be an empty tomb, but empty pews. But Hamalis, the religion professor who saw Christianity boom in South Korea, says Christians who fear that kind of future can take solace in the Easter message. From a Christian perspective, there's nothing to fear because even death has been conquered, Hamalis says. When we are liberated from that fear, we can embrace the person who's different from us, who speaks a different language or comes from a different culture. We can put ourselves out there in a way that we can't if we're just afraid. He and the other scholars envision a vibrant future for Christianity in the US that's shared by Warren, the New York Times columnist. The future of American Christianity is neither white evangelicalism nor white progressivism, Warren wrote. The future of American Christianity now appears to be a multi-ethnic community that is largely led by immigrants of the children of immigrants, sorry. In the American church, if the American church can embrace this future and reverse its shrinking membership, it will have experienced its own resurrection. Oh, wait. So I feel like this article is one trying to equate spirituality as religiousness, which is not the case. And two, I feel like they're trying to say like, hey, you know what? Maybe the people who are really, really racist right now and like being racist in the name of Christianity will maybe recognize that they should actually use the people that they're racist against for their own benefit. And that will save Christianity. Like, am I wrong that that's what I got out of that perspective? It's like saying, hey, all these people that you've been mean to and you've been claiming you're like way better than them and you've not been including them in like anything and you've been basically calling them less than human beings. What if we realize that they are human beings that share things in common with us and we just use them for our own benefit instead of being racist towards them? Then we'll salvage the declining belief in this country. That's what I got out of that. I don't know. But I hate to burst their bubble. Let's just look at a few, like, let's just look at some stuff real quick. I don't want to burst their bubble. I don't want to, rain on their parade. But let's just look. Let's just take a look. So the decline of Christianity in the Western world, and this is Wikipedia. Now, when I was in debate, they used to say Wikipedia is not a good enough source. I disagree, depending on what it is you're looking up. but this is just what I'm going to read today. Okay? If you were a former debate opponent of mine. The decline of Christianity in the Western world is the decreasing Christian affiliation in the Western world. While most countries in the Western world, let's take a shot every time they say Western world, were historically almost exclusively Christian, the post-World War II era has seen developed countries with modern, secular educational facilities shifting towards post-Christian, secular, globalized, multicultural, multi-faith societies. While Christianity is currently the predominant religion in Latin America, Europe, and Canada, and the United States, that the religion is declining in many of these areas, including Western Europe, North America, and Oceania. A decline in Christianity among countries in Latin America's southern cone has also contributed to a rise in irreligion in Latin America. Wow, that is a mouthful. Also, Oceania, for people who don't know, that is like Australia and New Zealand. I learned that the other day. I thought that was real interesting. Had no idea where that was. So background, according to a 2012 Pew Research Center study, which is also what they quoted in CNN, Christianity will continue to be the world's largest religion throughout the next 4 decades. However, Christianity may experience the largest net losses in terms of religious conversion, according to expectations. Worldwide, religious conversations are projected to have a modest impact. Are projected to have a modest impact on changes in the Christian population between 2010 and 2050, and may negatively affect the growth of Christian population and its share of the world's population slightly. However, these forecasts lack reliable data on the religious conversion in China, but according to media reports and expert assessments, it is possible that the rapid growth of Christianity in China may maintain or even increase the current numerical advantage of Christianity as the largest religion in the world. In the United States, there have been some conversions to Christianity among those who grew up non-religious, but it has not been in numbers that make up for those who were raised as Christians but have become religiously unaffiliated later in their lives. So basically, what they're saying is there's a ton of Christians in the world, and while the decline of Christianity won't harm global Christianity, it sounds like it will harm numbers in American Christianity. We can say all we want that everybody in South America is Christian, everybody in China is Christian, everybody in Korea is Christian, but in America, we are seeing this decline, right? The numbers are just there. The statistics are just there. So yes, globally, I do agree that Christianity will probably be the number one religion for a very long time. I think they said 40 years or 5 decades or something like that. That I don't disagree with. I'm talking specifically about America and the decline that we're seeing in American Christianity because of things like not wanting to associate with white nationalism, not wanting to associate with the election of Trump, things like that. So the CNN article, I think, highlighted a lot of people that have a wishful thinking about them, that are equating the message of Jesus rising again after being crucified at Easter as like symbolism that Christianity will also rise from the ashes, once it's been what's the word I'm looking for, abandoned by so many Americans. But at the same time, the people who believe the Easter story are not the problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you believe the Easter story, if you're the type of person who listens to the Easter story and believes it, you are also the type of person who benefits from Christianity making a resurgence. And if you don't believe the Easter story, you're the kind of person they're talking about, right? If you don't take the Easter story as fact, if you think it is just like a narrative story, you're not gonna agree with their saying like, oh, use that as symbolism. You're not going to agree with it, right? So it's just they're pandering to an audience that already agrees with them, right? The example they gave is an audience that already agrees with them. I feel like I'm just going off. Brian Ritchie says Andrew L. Seidel, I'm going to say Seidel, has good books on Christian nationalism, the founding myth, why Christian nationalism is un-American, and American Crusade, how the Supreme Court is weaponizing religious freedom. That's awesome. I'm going to write those down. Hello, B.S. Lewis. It is nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Maybe you've been here the whole time. Maybe you're just commenting. It's good to see you. So yeah, just something to think about. I saw this article. I read it live, obviously, to you. So this was like a live reaction. But I think what I gleaned from this, and I'm trying not to be biased, but I totally understand how I can be entirely biased in this situation, is that American Christianity is in the decline. Studies have shown, the statistics are out there. We're watching it happen before our very eyes, right? The secular movement and the agnostic movement and the atheist movement is growing. And secular doesn't mean non-religious all the time. I understand that. Like, I know that there can sometimes be people who, while they are religious, they support like secular art and like secular creativity. But at the same time, like, as we're seeing it happen, we're seeing it here on YouTube, we're seeing it across the internet, we're seeing it in places like Reddit. Secularism, atheism, agnosticism, they're growing. Kind of like I said in the beginning, I don't necessarily think that it's becoming more popular. I think what's happening is people have very much always been atheists, but we lived in a society here in the United States where you weren't allowed to be atheist. You weren't allowed to say that. You weren't allowed to not believe in God. So in the studies that they showed where like 90% of Americans were Christian, I doubt that's an accurate number. I do believe that that's what the statistic came back as, but I think there were a lot of people who were just closeted non-Christian, and society told them they needed to be Christian. That's a good thing to do. You don't want to embarrass your family. You don't want to embarrass whatever. You don't want to look weird at work or like lose your job. So you say you're a Christian. Now I think we're seeing these people who have always thought it was kind of bunk and BS able to come out and have jobs and have careers and have social lives and not have to worry about the blowback on their family because they're allowed to talk about these things. And then also, there's just more human beings. And so there's more likely to be secular human beings. And I do think we've seen a lot of people change from Christianity to non-Christianity, but I digress. So I do think the decline in America is happening at a rapid rate. I mean, look, I think they said what? It went from 90 to like 65% in just like a couple of decades. That's wild. That's astronomical. And I think it'll continue to happen. But I think what the people who want Christianity to make a resurgence are hoping is they're hoping that that the people abroad who believe Christianity and who support Christianity, they're hoping they will come into the United States and they will bring Christianity with them and they'll bring their beliefs. So they will heighten the number of people in the United States that are Christians. But two, they're also kind of hoping to count global Christianity towards points for American Christianity, which to me is cheating. Kind of like when they said spiritual people are religious people, not the same thing. I think that's cheating. And I think if you have to go outside the border and like collect points like that to try and like scrape together the numbers that you want, that's like, in my opinion, that's like falsifying statistics. And that's not good for anybody because the truth is going to happen and the reality is going to happen whether it's something that you agree with or not. B.S. Lewis says, a big shocker for me was when I took it seriously. I found a lot of believers did not. Right. Exactly. It's always been interesting to me that Christianity is founded on belief when a lot of believers don't actually believe at all. A lot of believers have to be convinced on a daily basis, whether secretly or outwardly, to continue to believe. And one of the main what the pillars, I guess, of Christianity is that it's not easy and it's trials and it's tribulations, right? And it's a constant effort that you're making to maintain a relationship with God and with Jesus. But maybe part of the reason why it's so difficult to maintain and why it's so difficult to defend is because there isn't a lot of scientific evidence or historical empirical evidence or literal physical evidence to back up a lot of these belief systems. And I've said this a million times on the podcast before. Maybe I've said it on live streams before as well. True belief is when you have been allowed to explore a bunch of different options, both to the end that you are hoping to believe and to the antithesis, right? You're allowed to look up whatever you want and come to your own conclusion. And then by the time you've seen as many options as possible and you've been given the opportunity to change your mind if you want, and you still come back to that original idea, to me, that's true belief. True belief is not, if I don't believe this, I'm going to hell. Or if I don't believe this, my family will shun me, or my church will shun me, or my society will shun me, right? That's not true belief. To me, that's coercion. But so much of Christianity calls that belief, and that's not what belief is. Like, literally just baseline definition of belief, that's not what it is. And so it's interesting to me that the very foundation of a religion that is founded upon belief has some of the least amount of true believers that I've ever seen. They have people that are afraid to not believe. They have people that believe but have never once exposed themselves to any alternative ideas. They even have people that block alternative ideas because they're worried that if their family members or their church members are exposed to those alternative ideas, they'll change their mind, which makes you think, right? But I don't think that's true belief. I think belief is, you know, I think that I like pepperoni pizza better. I've never had any other kind of pizza. I'm going to try 5 or 6 different kinds of pizza. And at the end of the day, if I still think pepperoni is the best one, it's my favorite pizza ever, that's belief because I've had the opportunity to experience different beliefs. Brian Ritchie says, what are some changes you expect to see within Christianity as numbers continue to drop? Um, I think that's a really good question. Thank you for asking. I think we will see Christians try to pander towards the nuns, as they were saying, or the secular millennials. I think we'll see a lot of people do the whole no, 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 the Bible doesn't mean this when it says that. What it means is this, right? We're cool. We're the cool church. We're the cool church that lets you do whatever you want. When in reality, what they're doing is not Christian stuff at all, does not in line with Christianity at all. I think we'll see a lot of people I don't want to say lower their standards, but I think we'll see a lot of Christians and a lot of churches lower their expectations to try and bring in more and more people, right? They'll try to like, no, no, we're a pro this church. We're an anti that church. We're not like other churches, right? Like not like other girls. Um, and they'll be dishonest about it. They'll be dishonest and they'll be dishonest with themselves, even if in that moment they're like, no, I actually believe this cool, hip stuff, this cool, modern version of Christianity. If they're honest with themselves, that's not Christianity. It's just not. If you look at the reason I no longer identify that way is because I looked at the rules and I looked at what I had to identify with in order to call myself a Christian, and I didn't identify with that. I didn't want to say that I supported that, right? So we're either going to see a huge influx in non-denominational churches, which when I was growing up that just meant you were a Baptist, that didn't call yourself a Baptist, but I think we're going to see a major influx in non-denominational churches that claim that they don't follow any like clear rules. They're just cool. They play cool music. Their youth pastor wears leather jackets and puts got to be glued in his hair. Um, but in reality, what we're going to see is either people who are lying for the sake of getting people in the door, or we're going to see churches that, if they're being totally honest with themselves, aren't actually following Christianity. But what they're doing is they're pandering towards people who want to still be labeled Christian, and they're pandering towards people who want all the cool non-Christian perks of going to church, the social aspect, and they're just going to say whatever they have to say and do whatever they have to do in order to get members. And it's going to be very shady. It's going to be very sketchy. And again, there's going to be people who do this having no intention of being shady and sketchy at all, because nobody's allowed to confront them and say, no, 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 no. I have a Bible verse right here that says what you and your church support is against what God says and is against what Jesus said. What do you have to say about that, right? But nobody's going to question them, right? Nobody's going to say anything about that because they are also comfortable pretending that that's righteous Christianity too. They're also comfortable, right? I remember thinking that going to the cool church was better because it was easier, and like I liked being able to say, I went to church this morning. I did like Bible things this morning. I hung out with other Christians this morning. I am a Christian. When really, if you actually read the Bible, which a shocking number of people who are no longer Christian have read the Bible, and a shocking number of people who tout Christianity as like their main identifying factor have not read the Bible, what you're doing in church is not Christianity. You need to come up with a new name for it at least. right? At least non-denominational is a little bit more honest. But again, like 90% of the churches I went to that were non-denominational were just Baptist light. That's literally what that was. Um, and so, oh, B.S. Lewis says more Starbucks. We're going to see that too. We're going to see stuff like that. We're going to see churches on TikTok and trying to pander to the younger crowds and trying to say, like, if you follow the Bible, that means you love everybody, including all these people, which is true. But then when it comes to like putting it into action, we're just going to see a bunch of churches do whatever they have to do and say whatever they have to say to get bodies in the door, even if what they're doing is not real Christianity, is not classic Christianity, right? And don't get me wrong, I would love to see more pro LGBTQ places where we can congregate, more anti-racist places where people can congregate. I love the idea of people getting together and singing and clapping and doing what churches might consider worship, right? But if you're lying in order to make that happen, if you're lying and you're saying, this is what Christianity is about, what we're doing right now is what Christianity is about, then you either haven't read the Bible or you are willingly misleading people into thinking and allowing them to think like that they're being great Christians too when they're not. You're being something else. You're being decent people if it comes from a real place, if you're not just doing it to get bodies in the door, if that's truly what you believe, you're being decent people. But a lot of these hip and new age, new wave, cool things that like millennial pastors are doing does not align with actual Christianity. It just doesn't. It just doesn't, right? It's like somebody claiming they're a Democrat and then also like speaking against literally every talking point of a Democrat. At a certain point, you're going to be like, why do you still go by Democrat? Why don't you just call yourself something else, right? Or Republican. It's like somebody saying, like, I'm a Republican through and through, and then also disparaging against everything that the main hot ticket items that Republicans believe in. You're like, why would you still like that? Just seems exhausting to still try and defend them and identify as them all the time when that's like clearly not what you believe. So maybe we'll see a research of something that's not Christianity. Maybe we'll see like a whole new sect or religion come out of the ashes like a phoenix. But I don't think we will. I think people will want to call themselves Christians forever because they're still scared of burning in hell and not getting raptured when Kirk Cameron comes to save everyone. But it's not going to be real Christianity, right? Say what you want about fundies. Say what you want about fundamentalists. But at least when you're like, wait, so you believe this fucked up shit? They're like, yeah. Yeah. Like, say what you want about Calvinists. Some of the scariest people I've ever met in my life. Calvinism scares the shit out of me. But at least Calvinism reads the Bible and goes, yep. Yep. And when you're like, what about the fucked up shit that the Bible says about women? They're like, yep. Those are the rules, right? Do I want Calvinists in charge? No. But at least I appreciate their honesty and their ability to read the Bible and be like, this is what the Bible says. This is what we're going to do. As opposed to, no, 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 no. When the Bible tells fathers to drag their daughters into the middle of the village and stone them to death for not being virgins before they get married, that's not what they mean. It's a metaphor. Look it up, right? Like when the Bible says don't eat pork, they're like, look, people couldn't eat pork back then because they didn't have refrigerators. People were dying. It's different now. Now, even though the Bible says don't wear mixed fabrics and don't eat pork, I am more than welcome to wear my football jersey and eat my hot dog on Sunday in the name of Jesus because things are different now, right? Things are different. Like, just go with it, right? At least Calvinists are like, don't. Now, they probably still do it anyway, but at least like they say, yes, I believe this fucked up shit, right? How did this become a soapbox? How did this become like, I was just reading an article and now I'm like, and the Calvinists. I will say this. I have never had better banana bread than when you're a new member at a church. Did any other religions do that? Baptists, they always had like a fresh loaf of banana bread for people who were visiting for the first time. I tried to pretend like I was new to my church every freaking week because I wanted that banana bread. I've lost a lot of weight since I was a kid. Brian says, more Starbucks. The local megachurch does have a coffee shop in the center of it. Same. So I live in Tennessee, and there are multiple megachurches here with Starbucks in them. I swear to you. Yeah, B.S. Lewis, that darn Bible keeps cramping their style. I know. The rule book keeps making the rules hard. The rules aren't cool when you follow them. And then you say the fundamentalists aren't moral and the progressives aren't honest or illiterate. Exactly. I mean, yeah, right? Like, I like to consider myself a progressive person. Yeah, but I would still say that a lot of times, if you're going to say, like, oh, I follow these rules, you're fudging some rules, right? Or I follow even laws, right? Like, how many of us like fudge laws on like a daily basis and still consider ourselves good people? Now, I think we are good people, but that doesn't mean that we're living our life exactly right, right? Same with Christians. Like, I remember one day on Facebook, a friend of mine announced that she was going to be a pastor at a new church, and she was really excited about it. Her dad was a pastor. It was very exciting. And then somebody posted in the comments the Bible verse about women, or several Bible verses about women not being able to preach, and like how women should not be able to preach. And then it devolved into like this argument about like, that's not what that meant. It was a metaphor. This is because of this and that and the other. But like, that's what the Bible says. That's what it says. It says women shouldn't preach. I remember that sermon like it was yesterday, and I was like 11, I think the first time I heard it, 10 or 11, but that's what it says. Now, if you look at that, if you're like, this Bible says that women shouldn't preach, but I still want to be a preacher, maybe you're not a Christian. So why is it that you're hanging on so hard to that label? You don't need it. You don't need it, right? I used to be labeled smoking hot all the time, so I shaved my head. Why? Because I don't do labels. I don't need them, right? I'm living my life. I don't need labels. I can reject the label of being a sexual, hot being and instead embrace who I really am, which is apparently a hedgehog, right? You don't need labels. Why not start your own church? Why not call yourself something else? Why not say we're not Christians here because we don't agree with a lot of what the Bible says? We're going to pick the pieces that we like, right? We're going to, a lot of the 10 commandments are just decent advice. We're going to pick the pieces that we like, but we're going to reject the pieces that we don't like. Oh, I know, because that would be secularism. If you take the only good parts that make you a good person out of the Bible and you apply it to your life and you reject all the religious stuff, that makes you secular. That makes you very close to agnostic or atheist, because that's what we're out here doing, right? Like, I'm not going to covet my neighbor's wife at any point, but I'm going to eat pork. And I shop at Shein sometimes, not anymore, ever since we found out about like the labor, slave labor and all that. But I used to. So I've got a lot of mixed fabric in there, although fabric is a strong word, honestly. But don't call yourself Christian if you're not going to follow the rules of Christianity. If you're going to reject the rules of Christianity, if you're a pastor or a youth pastor and you're like, I don't like what the Bible keeps telling me, I'm not a fan, I'm going to change a lot of this, maybe start with the title you're going by. I had an interesting conversation with Tim Whitaker from New Evangelicals. And I asked him that question. I was like, so much of what you're saying is progressive, and so much of what you're saying is the opposite of what evangelicals stand for. Why? Why do you still use the name evangelicals? Like, why would you still want to be associated with evangelicals when that's clearly not what you stand for anymore, even though you believe in God and you believe in Jesus? And he admitted, he's like, just cause. He's like, because I'm trying to remember the way that he phrased it. I've got the episode. It's up. It's on the podcast. I'm trying to remember the way he phrased it. But basically he was like, because it's a hot button word. And if there was a better word to describe what we are, well, we would probably use it. But now it's kind of our brand. That's honesty I appreciate. But it still makes you wonder. Almost everything that he supports and believes is the opposite of what an actual evangelical person would tell you. So why would you still want to be associated with that group? That's like, why would you still want to be associated with a group that's known for bigotry and sexism and hate and twisting morality, claiming they have morals when they don't. And that's like, I guess that's for, him to know and us to find out. But he did admit, he was like, I use that because it's the title. It's kind of just how we roll. It's kind of how we are as a brand. But I was just grateful that he didn't try to say that everything evangelicals believe he still believes, because that would have been a bald-faced lie after the conversation we had just had. He's a very progressive individual, and with people like him, I have hope, because he is exactly the kind of person I was talking about. That's like, come to this church. We do things much differently than other churches. We are much more progressive and inclusive and inviting. But then why are you still calling yourself a Christian? Why would you still want any of the negative connotations that come with a label if that label doesn't apply to you anymore? Why not come up with your own label? Why not give yourself like a fresh start without being under the umbrella of the negativity that comes with the additional label, right? That's just what I'm thinking. Anything else? Any other questions, comments? Do you want to know my opinion on things? One of the reasons why I do stand-up comedy so much is because, like, people aren't allowed to, like, interrupt me. It's, like, frowned upon, and I'm finding the live streaming is the same way. I'm starting to like it. Brian Ritchie says, it seems to support that there are no rules to any of the labels going forward. Today's Catholic isn't yesterday's Catholic, etc. Sure. But my question for them is, then why even use the brand? Right? Like, and I get it. I understand the idea that you want to take people who, oh, I can hear my voice now. Is that my phone? It is. Ah, it is my headphone side. Hold on one second. Gonna lie on it. There we go. So I can still hear myself. Hold on one second. Let me hang up on my phone. There we go. So where was I saying? Oh yeah, I understand, like, identifying as Catholic in the beginning as you slowly, like, segue out of Catholicism in order to bring the people that agree with you on a lot of things, kind of like move them out with you. But at what point do we say we're going to change that title? Right? At what point do we say we're not just new Catholics, we're not just modern millennial Catholics, we are no longer Catholics? Very similar. We kept a couple of the things we liked about Catholicism, but now we're not Catholics anymore. Like, at what point are we going to say that, right? It's like atheist people and agnostic people, right? A lot of times they will kind of overlap a little bit. I call myself an agnostic atheist, but at what point am I going to pick one, right? And now I'm picking atheism. I've been doing that a lot more recently. I've been catching myself choosing the terminology that really applies to me. Same with Christians, evangelicals, fundamentalists, Catholics. At what point are you segueing far enough away from the label that you've used for so long that you're like, you know what? I'm not going to use that label anymore. We were this, now we're this. We're rebranding, right? We're meta now. We're no longer Facebook, That's what I've always wondered. Because, like, if I had a label that was frowned upon for being harmful, right? And being closed-minded and being bigoted, I would do whatever I could to get out from under that label, right? I would do whatever I could as quickly as I could to get out from under that label, as opposed to using that brand as long as I could to get me as far as it could, and then rejecting them after I'd used them for all the perks for as long as I possibly could. Just seems odd to me, that's all. But what do I know? What do I know? I'm just a podcast host and a girl who shaved her head the other day on accident. It was a long story. I'm still traumatized. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Dang, we're almost at the hour. That's crazy. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns. I wish I could tell fortunes, because then I would do that here. But I can't. I would make a lot of money if I could tell fortunes on live stream. I'm just gonna riff for a second, because my comment stream is delayed. So even if you're commenting right now, I won't be able to see it for a little bit. So I'm just gonna riff. This is why I don't do improv, though, because I can't think of anything. This is why I do stand-up. This is why I taught stand-up at Second City, not improv. I don't know anything about improvisation. thoughts, comments. Oh, I'm going to be at the Secular Student Alliance conference in June talking about podcasts, which is pretty cool. So, can I read your palm? Yes. Your palm says I'm going to just do the fortune cookie thing. If you ever come across a bad time, just know that the future will very likely be good soon. Hang in there. There you go. Fortune cookies aren't fortunes anymore. They're just like phrases. But yeah, I'm going to be at the Secular Student Alliance at the University of Missouri St. Louis in June. So if you happen to be in St. Louis at the end of June, the 16th through the 18th, I'm going to be talking about podcasts at 9 a.m. on Sunday the 18th, bright and early. But also, I'd love to say, hey, I'm going to be wearing some Fundie stuff. Okay, let me ask you this. I've been debating. I made some Fundie merch. I made some Growing Up Fundie merch. Is it lame if I wear a Growing Up Fundie shirt on a panel where I'm supposed to talk about podcasts? Or is that the same as wearing the band's shirt to the concert? Is that the same? Like, I want people to recognize because I'm not the only panelist. There'll be a couple of other people from other podcasts talking. Is it lame if I wear like a Growing Up Fundie shirt under like a nice jacket so that they know who I am and what I'm representing? Or is that like wearing like a Metallica shirt to a Metallica concert? Okay, cool. B.S. Lewis and Brian Ritchie say it's not lame, so it's not lame. I'll be handing out stickers. I made business cards. I made some stuff to give out to people. So if you happen to be in the St. Louis area, June 16th through 18th, let me know. And I'm also trying to add to my parrot flock. I have 4 parrots, and I really want to get another one. But that's neither here nor there. So that's what's going on. Soon, fortune cookies will have ads on them. Pretty soon, you'll break open a fortune cookie, and you'll just get a QR code, and you have to scan the QR code, and then it'll take you to a website where you have to like leave a tip in order to get your fortune. Yeah, that's my only opinion about that. Good. I'm glad it's not lame. Although I'm very lame, just to warn you. Listen, I literally have a parrot aviary in my house. I just hang out with parrots, and that's what I enjoy doing. So I don't think it can get a lot lamer than that. Like, honestly, honest to God. Like, I put colorful lights in my room, and I build jungle gyms for my parrots. That's all that I do. That's it. And I also I do some like virtual stuff. I like talk to people and interview and stuff like that. And I did have a stand-up show last week, which is pretty cool. And I have a couple more in a couple weeks. But that's I literally hang out with parrots. That's all that I do. And a dog. I have a dog too. And that's what I like. I just get a bunch of supplies from the dollar store and I just build jungle gyms. So B.S. Lewis, I feel you. I don't think you can get nerdier than that. Maybe you can. Maybe you can out nerd me, in which I challenge you. But yeah. Pine Creek Doug is the one who told me to go live. He told me this, I believe it was in November when I spoke to him. He also recommended this webcam. And at the time, I didn't think it was possible. Now I have a lot of fun. I come up with all kinds of reasons to go live. We've got let's talk about the future. How do you have a cat and birds living together? I don't have a cat. I have a dog. A dog, not a cat. I don't like cats. No offense towards cats or people who have them. I'm like traumatized by the smell of litter boxes because like a lot of people I knew growing up did not take care of their litter boxes. And so like I will never have a cat. This has been decided. But I do have a dog and she is turning 15 next month. So she just like unsubbed. I'm sorry. No offense. I'm not a fan of cats. No, let me take that back. I'm a fan of cats. I don't like owning cats. So our upcoming live streams. Let's see. So I've got like 7 interviews for episodes that I'm doing like the first week of May. Then we have 2 live streams so far. There's going to be more. But on May 25th, I'm interviewing Andrew Pledger, who was on a former episode. He's an activist. He's a religious trauma survivor, which is pretty cool. And he also has a podcast, so he's going to be back. He's been on a former episode. And then the next day, on the 26th, I'm going to have Archradish Chad back. The reason my live stream guests are people that have been on episodes before is because I want to make sure I've like vetted people. I'm not at the point where I trust a complete stranger to get on a live stream with me and not say something that's going to get me canceled. So For a while, the live stream guests, like earlier today, are going to be people who have been on episodes before. One, because I really like them. I've been making a lot of friends through these episodes. But two, because I know they're not going to get on here and say some like crazy shit that like comes out of left field. I've already like talked to them. So it's going to be that way for a minute. Maybe at the SSA conference, I'll meet some people that I know now, and they're new to you and they haven't been on an episode. Although a lot of them are going to be on upcoming episodes. Guys, I went through the list of other speakers that I got, and I like invited a lot of people to be on my podcast because I really want to make friends and I really wanted to meet people in real life that I had already talked to on the podcast. So between now and June, a lot of the guests are going to be SSA speakers and guests, but I digress. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So I might meet some people there and give them my card and sign them up to be a live stream guest because I know they're not nuts. But there's been like one or two people that I've spoken to who have been guests whose episodes haven't made it up yet because they would get me canceled if I posted their episodes. And those are the kind of people that I don't want on live streams because I like this. This is fun. And I want to keep adding like lights and stuff without getting canceled before I have a chance to do it. I haven't even sold the shirt yet. Not even to myself. I haven't even bought the shirt yet that I plan on wearing to SSA. But I digress. I think I've said that like 100 times. Anyway, I think that's the stream. I think that's it, you guys. Appreciate everybody coming on and interacting. I plan on live streaming a lot more. There's a lot of fun. We're going to have guests. We're going to have news articles. We're going to riff. I'm going to get better at riffing before I say that we're going to riff. There's going to be birds. There's going to be, my parrots were on earlier. There's going to be birds. It's going to be a lot of cool stuff. Tell your friends. Tell your kids. Tell your wife. Tell your husband. Because we're streaming everybody out here. Oh, somebody asks, do the numbers matter if the USA becomes a theocracy Christian nation? The minority can still impose their wills on the majority. I think it has to do with taking a stance and making our voices heard, right? Even if certain people are making the laws, like it's tough. It's really tough because I don't want it to come to that. Like I don't want it to come to that. But I do think if the group in power feels like they're leaving, feels like they're running out of members, feels like they're slipping and they're losing power, I feel like they will dive head first into doing whatever they have to do to make sure that whatever it is they're in charge of, they stay in charge of, to even to the detriment of their own people. Like, have you noticed that a lot of these like crazy, wacko, fundamentalist conservatives out here making rules that like even harm their own people, like even harm their own individual followers, which is odd to me because they're like, stop leaving Christianity, but then they're like, also fuck you, Christian. Like it's weird. So I think a lot of the people that really want a Christian theocracy are dying. They're getting older. They're dying. So they are going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that their laws stay in place, that their people stay in office, that they vote in whoever they have to vote in to keep their agenda going. Again, even if it's to the detriment of the nation, they don't give a fuck. They just want their stuff, right? They just want to stay in power. So hopefully, what I'm hoping will happen is those people will eat themselves, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Reddit page, Leopards Ate My Face, right? I hope that all the people who are so desperate to stay in power that they just start like passing laws regardless of how harmful it can be to anybody who it's supposed to impact. I hope that like implodes within itself and just like, oh, what movie was that where the creature like imploded upon itself and just like melted? I'm trying to remember what that was. It was some like sci-fi movie, regardless. But I don't want to see how many innocent people it takes with it on the way, right? I don't want to see how many like open-minded people who are just here trying to live their life and exist in this country because this is where we were born and it's expensive to leave, get taken down in the effort to take down the people who are the problem, if that makes sense. It's tough. It's tough, guys, but anyway, thank you, B.S. Lewis. Thank you, Brian Ritchie. Thank you, Henry Mars. Thank you. I don't think anybody else commented, but anybody who's been watching, I've been watching the number tick around. Thanks for joining us. We've been streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch, and I'm stoked to have you. And I plan to stream more often, so I'd love to see you more often. I'm going to do it at different times so it works for everybody because I heard you loud and clear. 8 p.m. on Fridays was not ideal for people, especially those who don't live in the United States. And even those who do, they're tired. So am I. So I get it. It's going to be a good time. Thanks for your support. I really appreciate you. It's people like you that are part of the reason why I was invited to speak at SSA on podcasts. I wouldn't be a podcast without you. So we got a new comment. Thank you, and keep the faith. Let's be optimistic. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. That's like the perfect way to end the night. What a great comment to end the night on. Henry Mars. Thank you all for watching this channel, and I will see you later. Adios.